So good afternoon. I want to start with wisdom, and I'm going to start with the voices of children.
Faster than boys. They speak before boys do.
I rose and found
They read before boys
on
do.
every buttercup. But my lazy little shadow, like an errant sleeping head, had stayed at home behind me and was fast asleep in bed.
Globally, less than 25% of senior management roles are held by women.
Women represent 40% of the world's labour force, but control only a quarter of the world's wealth.
31 million girls worldwide are still denied a primary education.
Globally, women make up less than 20% of government.
Women earn up to 36% less than men.
So this is a bank ad from the ANZ Bank in Australia. And I'm noticing a trend around the globe of watching global corporate business starting to look at social issues in a way they've never thought before. There's, of course, the most recent Heineken Worlds Apart spot around looking at how we come together and actually listen to each other around difference, when what I'm noticing around the globe is almost the antithesis of that. It's happened in my own country with the election of this current president, where we pitted literally half of the country against the other, don't listen to one another, demonize others for the sport of actually feeling like we're closer to at least part of our countries. So I want to also stay on this theme of children, but I want to move to a religious text for a second. I want to quote something out of the Talmud, the Jewish book. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You're not obligated to complete the work, nor are you free to abandon it. So 40 years ago, I started working with people, and I consider myself an educator and a behavioralist, and now an interventionist. And I work at the people side of relationship, and I particularly in the last 20 years have worked around the globe with a lot of white men, particularly in business, because again, I noticed my group largely disconnected from this topic, not just of gender equality, but of all issues of inclusion and diversity. And I said, I don't think this is sustainable. If there absolutely is a business imperative to go hire and retain the best talent, not from the same 4 rocks or 4 universities, but from lots of different places, but yet there's a history around the globe of we hire and promote what? People who are most like ourselves. And we do that because the speed of commerce is, at least the mindset is forcing us to move fast. And so we hire people who we know how to speak in shorthand, we get a lot of work done, and we make immediate pieces. So these are 2 of my 6 grandchildren, Quinn and Kyler. Quinn, his mother is from Burkina Faso, married to my son, and they live in Portland, Oregon. Kyler, mother and father, are both US-born Oregonians, and 2 of my other grandkids are a mixture of Chinese, American, and US. And so that's the other piece going on in this globe, is the globe is shrinking. Many of you, I can imagine your significant other is from another nationality than you are, and potentially even speak another language than yourself. And that world continues to shrink, certainly also at the business level, as we know. What's this number represent? Anybody know? Anybody? That might be countries, these are the members of the UN states, members of the United Nations, 193 members of the UN. What's this number represent? What do you think? Yes, these are currently, of those 193, the 15 companies that currently have a woman leader, 7.7%. And that number fluctuates a little bit. There's been 70, over the course of humanity, there's been 70 of those 193 companies have been led by a woman. But again, in my country, the United States, we're yet, as we all know, to have a woman leader. Here we know in Europe, just a few weeks ago, here in France, and earlier this year in Holland, these two leaders lost. But yet, we also now find that there is an emergence of we're fearing the most what we know the least. And this is a global phenomena. It's one of the ways that we've gained solidarity of our own people by making them afraid of someone to be able to rally the masses. And this fear of other is not only killing us, but it's certainly impacting the quality of the existence and the productivity of the businesses that many of you are a part of. I haven't given up on NGOs and governments, but about 20 years or so ago, I went full in to say I'm going to put my efforts towards working with global companies, not because they're the only ones, but because the speed of execution that drives their profitability and the fact that they are literally they're in global markets. I have great hope that they're able to sort of be the change that we need to see so that we as a planet can finally learn how to mutually coexist. And then there's these three gentlemen, which are just the bottom, or just a piece of a much larger piece of, this reemergence of what I would call sort of the ultranationalist strongmen who are using what I would say really old style of intimidation or bully pulpit in order to sort of, quote unquote, get things done. And that brings me then to this notion about what does it mean to be a real man in 2017? And I'm noticing that there's a lot of paradox around that. So we've got these three leaders, and Duterte from Philippines is another one. But we also have an epidemic about men questioning, what does it mean for me to be male? And while we saw in the last 15 years a large struggle with young girls around their own identity, particularly when they reach adolescence, part of that is around watching the STEM scores really take a nosedive, and not all of it, but part of it, at least from my understanding, has been linked to those young girls not wanting to be brighter than the boys when sort of the hormones come up for young boys and girls who might be heterosexual. So what does any of that have to do with you and I and gender equality efforts? All right? So definition of uber masculine. It's a man who's extremely masculine. And I think it's afraid to show a softer side. And again, Pam, the research that I've watched you and Mercer do for years now, along with other incredible researchers around the globe, is showing that the qualities that have been typically thought of as feminine are actually really instrumental in the type of leadership that we need to be able to lead global teams. And the fact, empathy and compassion and those other things that sometimes are typically thought of as more feminine actually are in me and other men. But yet, I've been conditioned, as many other men do, to not show that soft side. That's seen as weak. That's seen as don't cry, don't let them see behind the curtain. I know it's impacting me and other men. It's also impacting the quality of the types of relationships that we have, both in professional life and in our personal lives, not just with other women in our lives, with other men. So that comes up now. Watch this Axe commercial.
Is it okay to be skinny?
Pass the ball, bro.
No. Is it okay to not like sports?
Is it okay to be a virgin?
To experiment with other guys?
Is it okay for guys to wear pink? Is it okay for guys to be nervous?
To have long hair?
To like cuts?
To take a selfie? To shave your... To be depressed?
To be scared?
Wait, is it okay for me to be a little spoon?
Come on, man. Is it okay for guys to...
Go online to search and see for yourself.
So while young girls have struggled for many years, and still that struggle is there, we're watching the reemergence of struggles that young boys and adolescent men, the advent of online gaming, online pornography. We're seeing young boys really 2 to 3 years developmentally behind girls at university age. In the United States, we're seeing more young girls be graduating from universities than boys. There is a widening gulf. And then you compare and contrast that to the data and statistics that Pam and Mercer were just talking about. It doesn't make for a very bright future. And it's concerning. So then you look into the political realm. This is just, a member of the European Parliament who was actually sanctioned by saying out loud they're weaker, women are smaller, and they're less intelligent. There's lots of examples of this sort of mindset that is out there about demonizing half of the sky, and by half of the sky, that's a Chinese adverb that describes women, just as the other half of the sky could be also men. Then we also know this year that the Duma in Russia, with only 3 dissenters, voted to decriminalize domestic violence, again, if it's against family members. And then who is this in my country? Anybody know who these politicians represent? These are the 13 members of the Senate who are working on the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which last time I checked was about health care in my country for men and women. But there's no women involved, and it was actually then pointed out to them, and they were sort of unbeknownst to them. Bringing it into the business context, again, Pam and others have done lots more research, but this is just a piece about from HP. When women applying for jobs, they feel they have to be 100% matched. There's lots of data about that where I apply if I'm just sort of half there. And, while we've done a good job, I think, of sort of taking care of pay differential, it's data like this that actually makes that pay differential happen, because I and other men are applying for jobs that we are thinking we're just half of the way there, and I am asking, Bill, can you do it? I nod my head and say, and I say to myself, I don't have a clue. But then I'll go figure it out. Women have been trained and conditioned to actually not even apply unless they feel that they have 90%. So these are not things that I don't think they're by random. I think they've been learned behavior. And if you go back to young children where we started, these young children know that this is not okay. Somewhere along the way, some synapses get crossed in our brains that start to tell us that men are good at this and women are only good at that. Then here in the UK, about your confidence in your profession. I was brought up in an environment where I was taught, own the room. And I call it acquired male answer syndrome. If asked a definitive question, I've learned to give a definitive answer whether I know what I'm talking about or not. I don't even know that I do it. And so that projection of self-confidence, which a lot of men have been schooled in, then we come into business settings and we're looking for our colleagues, male or female, to do the same thing. Women have been conditioned and rewarded to ask a lot more questions. That's then deemed not just by men, but by men and women as that person's not ready for a primetime leadership role, and hence the gulf widens back to Pam, your stats. And of course, it's more complex than that. So there are lots of reasons for obstacles. This piece of Catalyst research that was done in 2009 shows 3 barriers for men to be visible champions of gender equality. And the first one that always is really striking to me is apathy. And apathy is rooted in lack of understanding my mutual self-interest. So if I think of gender equality as a women's issue, and I'm all on board to help the women in my life, professionally or personally, sort of find their place in their career path, that's great on a short term, but long term, as we all know, because we've been working on this for decades, this is more difficult than simply sort of reordering the org chart and hiring some people. I have to understand what is the cost to me and other men for the inequality that half of the sky has been facing routinely, and actually I'm facing as well, except I'm the last in the room to know it. Another barrier is fear, and this happens on a couple different levels for men. It's fear of losing status. So for a lot of men, particularly American men, but I would extend that to Western Europe, we have a notion about we are beholden to no one. I'm just an individual, and so, but yet I'm afraid of losing status or being tossed out of the old boys club, which when you talk to a lot of men about how they are in the old boys club, they look at you quizzically because they don't think of themselves as a part of any club. They just think of themselves as unique individuals who have made it on their own. When in reality, I'm here because a whole bunch of people took a risk on me, sponsored me before I even knew what the word sponsor meant, and gave me an opportunity to sort of live my way into my full potential. And I'm really glad that's the case. And I'm also really glad and working towards the day where every person, regardless of their gender, their nationality, their religion, their whatever, has the capability to be seen as doing something that is more than possible. And then lastly, the other one is ignorance. And it doesn't matter whether it's real or perceived. Ignorance is not to be confused with stupidity. But for me as a man occupying the insider group, and when I say insider group, it's the normative group in the organizations we're a part of. It's the group that sets the norms, sets the rules, but doesn't know that it's doing it. I'm lots of times the last person in the room to know that everybody else is having to juggle and manage a bicultural, complex culture because they're trying to fit into my world. I don't even know, number one, I have a world, and secondly, what it is that they're up to. And now they've got an added deal with not only sort of taking on how to fit into the men's world, but also, do I bring it to Bill's attention? And what's it going to cost me if he says, I don't see it, or really, Julie over here is not having a problem, so let me just give you a little mentoring or coaching advice about how to overcome your difficulties just like I had them. So that can be really disconcerting to our partnerships, I can only imagine, having that, face that. So these three obstacles can really feel like a brick wall for a lot of men, and they don't even know that the brick wall's there. And then on top of that, we look at then employee networks. Actually just happened last week. I was in Texas, and I watched, been working in a system for 5 years, had a man stand up and say basically he committed to starting a white men's employee resource group, and got a lot of accolades from some women and ethnic minorities in that system. And then I talked to him and said about, that's great, and you're about to undertake probably one of the most difficult things you're ever going to do because of the perception about white men don't need a group. Every day at work is a white male group in many systems. And his desire is out of noticing that he and other white men have as much, if not more, to gain out of understanding how inclusion is really detrimental to their own personal ability to be effective change agents, as well as partnerships in the larger scheme of work endeavors.
Okay, Daisy, here we are in Tesco's. What do you think of the clothes on offer today?
Well, the girls' clothes say, hey, beautiful, I feel fabulous. The boys, desert adventure awaits. Think outside the box, hero.
And what do you think about that?
It's unfair because everyone thinks that girls should just be pretty and boys should just be adventurous.
And what do you think about that?
I think that's wrong because why should boys and girls even be boys and girls' clothes even be separated? Because we're just as good as each other.
That's brilliant. I agree with you completely, Daisy. And you love adventure, don't you?
Yeah.
You're my hero. And you like green. Why don't we just get you the boys' top? Good idea.
So, think outside the box. What does this mean? It means go on your adventures, let nothing stop you, go for your own dreams, and hey, what is that even supposed to mean?
I don't know, it would inspire you to say, hey.
Yeah. Like,
don't you find that inspiring?
I don't find that inspiring. What part of hey is great? I don't get it. Look.
So that's Daisy Edmond from the UK. The wisdom of children, right? She knows. She's not buying it, but somewhere along the way between, and hopefully not with Daisy and that next generation, she goes from there to being accepting some of the data that Mercer and others prepare to look at the inequity that continues to plague global business as well as just countries around the world. It's not certainly okay for Daisy and other young girls, but it's also not okay for my grandsons and for me and other men. So in this closing piece, just 5 mindsets that sort of come to mind about what does it mean to be a gender equality champion? Again, for me at a behavioral level, which is in sort of contrast and in support of what we need to do organizationally, 5 things come to mind for now. First of all is find your own self-interest and see your self-interest in concert with others. So it's not oppositional. I get this, you lose that. It's got to be an and both. Secondly, listen deeply. My experience around executives is that they feel like they know that this is really important, and most of them, me included, always think that we listen well. I often ask in my little organization as one of the owners, how do you know that I've heard you? And I'm amazed when they're telling me the truth, which I sometimes have to really goad them into, that I'm not listening very well, because what happens is my passion to want to get stuff done overwhelms my ability to listen to them. I move into advocacy, and I'm all about advocacy, and I find that to be the case when I find them agreeing with me without, exception. Somebody's not telling the truth, because it's rare that a group of people agree. We're probably not being very innovative. They're just sort of coexisting or colluding with me. So listening is deeply important. And it's not listening to agree, it's listening to understand. So it's important how we listen to each other when we don't agree, which is where the innovation happens. We don't get innovation when we all say the same thing right from the get-go. Thirdly, patience, having and practicing patience. As we know, and the data suggests this, many companies, maybe some of you are in the room, are in the 4th or 5th iteration of trying to get this right. And my experience as a behavioralist is that what has failed is thinking that simply they get to hire a bunch of new consultants to come in and because someone will give them the right answer key, or it's just in representation numbers, when really I believe it starts at first with a mindset. So having patience to stay in it long term rather than to be dismayed or overwhelmed when your first, second, or third effort goes for naught can be tough, because we're in an environment where patience is not often rewarded, particularly if you're a publicly traded company that has the return investment to your shareholders this quarter, if not this week or month. Fourth, persistence, somewhat similar to patience, but persistence is around diligence. So it's knowing what you stand for rather than flavor of the month. I find executives who say all the right stuff, and when I go talk to employees, the employees to a person say he or she doesn't get it. And particularly when I'm working with men, I said, what do you mean? He's talking from the neck up. Or someone, it sounds like, wrote his speaking points. And people speaking from the heart connect to their head, not 50-50 necessarily, are more believable. And you and I know when we're listening, I'm going to follow a leader when I know that he or she has the passion involved with the intellect. When it's just the intellect, I'm already awash in data, and so are you. I don't need more of it most of the time. I need someone that I can believe in, and they believe in me and other people in the organization. Then lastly is showing up. I think it was Woody Allen said 80% of life is showing up. How do we stay present in a world which is constantly either pulling us into the future with these things in our pockets or drawing us to the past? And knowing when we're standing for the 28 seconds in the hallway, how we give our full presence to that person, for me, is incredibly important, and I know I don't do it enough. So again, to close, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love, mercy now. Walk humbly now. You're not obligated to complete the work, nor are you free to abandon it. Thank you.